My name is Linda Mywert. I'm the Vice Chair of Fort McMurray Public School District. I am also a member of the Intergovernmental Political Relations Committee of PSBAA, and it is my extreme pleasure this morning to be given the opportunity to introduce our two guests. Michael Janz, right here with me. Michael Janz lives to promote education, literacy, and community. A two-term trustee and most recently the chair of Edmonton Public School District, he is passionate about the importance of public education. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree with a major in history from the University of Alberta and served as president of the University of Alberta Students' Union. Michael also served on the University of Alberta's Board of Governors and as vice president of the Edmonton Bicycle Commuters Society. Who knew? He worked as the marketing director of the Edmonton Federation of Community Leagues and currently serves on the Edmonton Public Library Board. In November 2012, Michael was honored with the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for community service and was selected as one of Edmonton's top 40 under 40. Way to go. A quote from Michael: "The trustee is an essential component of local democracy, and public education is the cornerstone of our democratic system. I'm thrilled to be able to work with my fellow trustees to help make decisions today that will better our city tomorrow." End quote. Please join me in welcoming Michael Janz. And Johannah Coe, also here. Johannah Coe, a grade 12 student at Edmonton Christian High School, was elected by a group of her peers to serve as student trustee on the board for the remainder of the 2014-2015 school year in this pilot initiative. Johannah will attend board meetings, special events, and professional learning opportunities. Johannah, who has worked in a research lab at the University of Alberta, volunteers for the Canadian Blood Services Youth Committee, and has recently traveled to Africa and Europe, which she says expanded her worldview. After completing high school, she is looking forward to pursuing a career that allows her to give a voice to those who are unheard and to continue learning from people she encounters. A quote from Johannah: "This is a great opportunity to have a visible student presence available at a district-wide level. I want to acknowledge individuals in the system and ensure they all have a voice. I want them to know they are part of a much larger voice across the district." End quote. Please join me in welcoming Johannah. And again, we welcome all the other students who are here with us today. It's a great privilege to have you here with us to keep us focused on the student lens. And I will now turn it over to Michael and Johannah. Thank you.
After I served as student union president, I met this fellow named David King, and he suggested that I come and research for this organization called the Public School Boards Association of Alberta. That got me interested in trusteeship, and working with David and being fortunate to have his mentorship brought me to where I am today. So I should give a shout out to David. Hopefully he's enjoying sunny Victoria, and to all of you in the association for getting me involved in this level. So Johannah, how do you like being student trustee?
I like it a lot, but before we start anything, if you are here for this session and you don't have a student at your table, please raise your hand. Okay, so for those who are sitting by yourselves, please find a bigger group, and students, please find a table that does not have a student.
Come to the front.
Yeah, and also move to the front. We'd really like, this is an opportunity for you to talk to each other and talk with one another.
Maybe could we get our students to stand up and wave?
Yeah,
Great.
Go find a table that has their hand up.
Oh, there's a table at the back.
Good. Is everyone settled? Made all the introductions? Yes? Awesome.
Wonderful. So everybody has a trustee, or sorry, everybody has a student at your table now. Every trustee has a student. Every student has a trustee. We got this? Okay, good.
You do?
So to begin.
I'm doing this because I want to contribute to the education system that has empowered me, and I'm doing this because I want to contribute to the education system that has empowered me, and I believe that it will empower others.
What I want to try and do is bring voices to people who are typically not as involved or who are very new to the school system.
I really believe in individualism. I want there to be more progressive and modern ways of learning. There needs to be this more one-on-one time to figure out how the student learns to bring out their full potential.
Basically, our Board of Trustees' responsibility is to the moral ownership of public education, and that's the community. And so bringing that student voice to the table will certainly help to guide decisions.
I'm really passionate about people. People are so diverse. They have so many things to offer. So if I could be the voice for those people, to have some input in the people that make the decisions for their educational career, I'd love to do that.
I'm very proud of today. I'm very proud of the energy that's come to the table and the excitement and enthusiasm. You guys have a great level of expertise, and we want to ensure that we have at least one student voice sitting at the board meeting participating on a regular basis and making decisions, because every decision this board makes impacts all of you in some way.
This is an incredible commitment. We all have a right and responsibility to leadership in our communities, in our democratic process, and just making Edmonton and Alberta and Canada a better place to live.
I really just want to bring out the main causes that I'm going to be promoting, which is transportation, growth accommodation, and schools as community hubs, because I feel like those are the main three that affect all students. Everyone has such a great platform. They're talking about so many great issues, but I'm confident in what I'm standing by.
If I think that a lot of students are looking for change in an area, I'm going to make sure that the Board of Trustees hears that. My focus is more involvement for Aboriginal students, international students, special needs students, and our LGBTQ students in the school board. And also really just recognizing that everyone in Canada has the right to a great education, and I want to ensure that they do feel like they're getting the best education possible and be as much of a part of that as I can.
Hi there. I've just worked so hard for the past 3 weeks. It's paid off, and I just hope it went my way.
These are all excellent people, and if I lose, I'm glad that I lose to them.
Now it's my pleasure to welcome and acknowledge the 15 student trustee candidates who ran in the election. We're the first school district in Alberta to have a student who will be sitting with us as a representative on our board, and we're proud of this accomplishment as it speaks to the importance of youth voice and student perspective. Our new student trustee will provide us with valuable feedback that will help us shape our decisions and enhance our efforts that we make every day to bring hope and opportunity to the lives of our kids. You ready? And you have chosen Johannah as your new student trustee.
A very big thank you to the board and also to the students and all the candidates who ran with me. It was a pleasure to meet all of you, and I look forward to working with you and hearing lots from you in the future.
It doesn't feel real. I was not expecting it at all, but awesome. It's been a whirlwind, but the whole time I always felt like there was support, both from the trustee members and also from the students. And of course, I have to give thanks to the teachers involved who sacrificed their time and energy organizing this event that wasn't just efficient, but it was also fun for the students.
Get in!
Joanna has to look the happiest.
if you're interested, that video is available on YouTube, and you can check it out there. So what we're hoping today is to have a short presentation to give you some of the background details about the process that we went through, both from the board perspective as well as from the student participation experience. We will then have hopefully a discussion and questions. We don't believe that this is the only path up the mountain. We know that many of you are doing really exciting initiatives within your own board for student engagement. We just hope to give you a bit of background on this one and how the experiment worked, and some of the ongoing conversations and opportunities we see ahead. So if it's possible, we'll blaze through this and then have a more fulsome question and answer period after. Yeah, oh, sorry. So on November 25th, 2014, Edmonton Public Schools made history by announcing its first ever student trustee. This is the first time in Alberta that we're aware of a student trustee has ever been part of a school board.
And so this idea has been already implemented by Ontario and British Columbia. So Ontario has a long-standing history and a very worked-in culture of having student trustees. And in British Columbia, they have several, not as far into the culture, and so Alberta decided to jump on this. So they looked at the School Act, board policies, and the regulations and trustees handbooks, and they consulted with SVI, which is a Canada-wide, nationwide organization working on student voice. And this is actually spearheaded by EPSB, and it came out from this desire to facilitate dialogue between students and the school board, increase student engagement in board policy and planning functions, and educate students about democratic governance. And how did we do it?
So a motion was put forward by, was it Trustee Hoffman? Trustee Sarah Hoffman and Claire Edwards. Claire Edwards was one of our student alumni, and she had an official title as well too. I can't remember either. But yeah, one of our student alumni. She worked with our past chair, Sarah Hoffman, to move the motion, and we have the text of the motion, but basically that the student representative, the student trustee, would be piloted for the 2014-2015 year. So September to November 2014, we, as you saw in the video, had the nominations process, there was campaigning, and we had an election day. We also then, on November 25th, 2014, the student trustee was announced. But we didn't just, maybe we could, Johanna, if you would like to speak about how the opportunities available to you as the student trustee and as a candidate. Who were the students that we were looking at for student trustee, and how did that all fit together?
Right, so the candidates were selected by asking the high schools to bring forward a candidate and 2 to 3 supporting members to the Student Advisory Council. So the Student Advisory Council is a group that meets, as it'll be mentioned in the future, biannually, put together by EPSB. So what they did was there were about 15 candidates from the high schools, and each high school had their own election process to choose their candidate. And they had 2 other representatives. So they came in, and that group, that body, created the voting group. So there's a very diverse group of students from all over the district, from different high schools, at the high school level, and they were the ones voting, just the students.
And who's on the Student Advisory Council?
Students who are on the Student Advisory Council are students also from high schools that are invited to join in. And so the Student Advisory Council plays a really important feedback role in terms of letting the board know how they're doing and bringing a student's perspective into various issues on the board.
So the criteria for our student trustee, we wanted a registered and in regular attendance student at a high school in grade 11 or 12. We wanted signed support from the school principal and at least 1 other adult staff member. We wanted signed parental consent. And we wanted to be identified by their school's student trustee selection committee as the candidate. So we sort of let the schools do a primary and figure out who their candidate would be before they were brought forward to the plenary, the council as a whole. Yeah, sorry.
So part of what I had to do, what we knew going into it, was that I would be non-voting. I would attend all the board meetings. I give a student report every month, and I can suggest a motion through a committee or my trustee mentor, but I can't personally make a motion. and follow the rules in the trustee handbook. So what I was is I was basically an acting trustee member without being able to vote. But I do go to all the board meetings, and they are my peers. And they've been very welcoming. I also have the opportunity to go and visit schools and meet with them. So that's the education component that we mentioned in some of the key points that we want to accomplish. So that's been something that I've been really working on this year, is a lot of education in terms of letting students know what the board is. So when I go to high schools, from high school to even junior high, many of the students haven't even heard of the board or what they do. So that's kind of my component. Yes.
Do you want to talk about doing media a couple times?
Oh, I've also spoken with the media. They've been very kind so far. I really appreciate it. So one of the other components that you saw was the leadership and governance group. So this is a group created by the district, first of its kind to have a district-wide leadership course. And so what they did is they weren't just giving students projects to just fulfill menial tasks. We actually looked at big picture ideas and really worked towards equipping the students with the instruments and the capabilities to be able to take on their own leadership tasks and to find where their interests lied, where their interests lied, grammar, where their interests were in some of the issues that they saw. So actually, this meeting was able to come about from this legacy course, where the students from legacy were able to look at an issue, speak out, see that the students weren't being heard, and that the students were kind of falling to the wayside, and be able to take the tools and the skills that they learned in legacy and be able to put them into use to have the students sit with you today. So the students at your table are there because of what came out of the legacy group. The Student Advisory Council meets biannually, and they're also just from the high schools. And so what's really good about this component is you get a very diverse group of high school students from all over the school, coming from different economic, cultural, educational backgrounds, and they're able to meet together, really interact, and see what the other schools across the district are doing. This is something that I think is really important in terms of getting a wide, broad-based range of student voices, not just those who are hyper involved.
If I can add an anecdote there. So we have students coming together to the Student Advisory Council, and over the last few years at least, we will have a sit down with them and the trustees. So it's a chance where we have small circles with the trustees, and we'll ask them different questions about, are you feeling prepared for the world of work? Do you appreciate the course offerings? What are some of your priorities? And what's unique about this group is we didn't just want the usual suspects, the Rutherford Scholarship already pre-accepted, sometimes the leadership sample that you usually get. We wanted to hear from a student who lived on their own and was paying rent to try and stay in school and work and juggle jobs. We wanted to hear from a young woman who's a single mother who's finishing high school. We wanted to hear from everyone. We wanted that broad selection and not just the usual suspects. And that, for me, it's not just the voices that you hear, it's the ones that you don't hear that we're trying to be attentive to. So the district's requirements of high schools for the candidate selection process, we wanted awareness amongst all students, so all students were aware of this opportunity that they could be engaged. We put out consistent messages from Central about what this process was supposed to be, what our goals were, and what the roles and responsibilities were. We wanted equity and being able to express interest. Like I said, we had the broad parameters of good attendance and a couple sign-offs, but we wanted different voices to come forward, and the nomination criteria. And then ultimately the selection panel at the school made the decisions to send the students forward for an election of their peers. So just to give you a sense of timeline, we had the nomination deadline by October 24th. On November 3rd, the Student Advisory Council and the candidates had trustee candidate orientation. You saw a bit of that in the video, meeting with the superintendent, learning about what the board did. We had senior staff work with our team to go through. We had the election day on the 20th, and then on the 25th, we had an announcement at our board meeting.
So it was kind of a whirlwind because you met one day with the Student Advisory Council. There's a very high turnover rate. So every time the Student Advisory Council meets, you're meeting with a different group of students, which is what was necessary for what the Student Advisory Council wants. But for this day, we had one day to meet together, kind of go over what this idea was, and then another day where that was our campaigning time. So during that time, we were able to speak about our views on student engagement, kind of give out our platform, so to speak. I want to say that it wasn't, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of work and effort put into it to make it interesting and fun for the students. It wasn't just a cut and dry, here's A, B, C policies. It was really fun. So it really let the students know that engagement doesn't have to be sitting down and having just meetings all the time. It can be fun. You make friends. I've made some really amazing friends through this process. One thing that I also want to note is that Elections Alberta ran the whole election. So this was very independent. So the students independently voted, and the whole election process was run by Elections Alberta, which I really appreciated in terms of giving it a little bit more weight. The benefits and challenges. Well, I'll let Michael speak first. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. So some of the benefits. Well, what I really got to see is I got to see how much work that EPSB was doing. And I didn't really have that kind of awareness of what was going on at a policy and board district level. When it comes to high schools and schools, the schools are often quite isolated unto themselves, so in their own school community. So you can know what the school is doing, but you don't really hear about other schools, or even broader than that, what the district's doing. So that's something that I really appreciated learning about, and that's something that I loved sharing with the students is, here's what the board is doing for you already. You know, if you have any questions, I can answer them for you. And so having that level of communication, and not transparency, so to speak, but that understanding between the students who are working in their schools, learning about other schools, and also from the board. Yes, and I also brought a visible youth perspective into the work of the Board of Trustees. So I hope that's something that I accomplished, is bringing this kind of different perspective to the Board of Trustees. I know what I've seen is from my colleagues is that they really do have education for the students first in their minds. And so being able to see that and also provide the students' perspective on it, I thought was a huge benefit.
Yeah, so we have a recommendation report, I think, coming to our a June board meeting, I believe, and I'm just hazy on what's to come, but this was the pilot project, and we'll have a report on the pilot project. So some of the challenges we identified was, first of all, Johannah has done an incredible job. She is a phenomenal multitasker and has a dozen different textbooks flying in the air. But we do recognize that this is a significant amount of time out of school for a student trustee. These are some of our top leaders who are going to be working hard on their exams and going on to future opportunities, and we don't want to detract from their studies. We for our sort of selfish board's sake, we did have to place some sort of limits on the students' involvement in board work. So for example, at our board, we have our public board meetings, and then we have our what we call our caucus committee, which is the land, labor, law in-camera meeting. Johannah doesn't come to those meetings, so she doesn't deal with the HR pieces internally or deal with some of the intricacies or confidential matters there. She does, however, she's privy to all of our public reports. Before each board meeting, I sit down with Johannah and we sort of game out the board meeting. I tell her how I'm leaning towards voting on each item and why, and we sort of share sort of that experience of like, this is what I'm thinking about, the lens I'm bringing to it as a trustee, as her mentor. The election process, we have 90,000 students in our district, and we just by recognition of that, we have some limits on how many students can be involved and what that looks like. So there's some participation limits there. I think the question that all of us as trustees are thinking about, and administration as well, is this the best way to bring the student voice to the board? Is there a way to engage more students in a different way? Is there a way to sustain or scale up this approach? Is there a way that we could do it again, but maybe find some other efficiencies in how we ran this program? These are all the different questions that we're sort of mulling over and looking at and collecting feedback. So here are some of the costs that we incurred. this would be broken down into staff time, into other pieces. We were fortunate to have many of our senior leaders very enthusiastic about the pilot project and wanted to help facilitate it. But you know, as we go through, moving students throughout the city to come and participate in this initiative does have a cost, so we're looking at that. The scholarship piece, as a very small token of appreciation to Johannah, one of the pieces we agreed is there would be a scholarship available to her after her term as student trustee that I believe you can put towards there's like over the next 3 years or something. There's some, yeah. So just like if you played in the WHL. So other resources that we used, there were the teacher time, the supports there, the supports from Central. There was resources spent coordinating and supporting the election. My time as the trustee mentor, which I regret is not as much as I'd like to put forward sometimes. We had additional support from communications, IT, and others, and then some staff time for wrapping up this project in terms of the evaluation. So, next steps. A report on the pilot is coming forward to the board in June 2015. We're going to be looking at this project through the lens of generative governance. What does this look like? Are there other options? I'm interested in hearing from you what some of the other options might be, and how can student voice support our strategic plan, and how can we make sure that we have a broad array of voices participating? So, our challenge: how do we build upon the synergy and excitement of this year's work to find a model of youth voice and leadership that is meaningful, engaging, sustainable, and reaches broadly across our system? So, questions and sharing. Please. Could you identify yourself and your board, please? Sure, and of course our minds are made up until we actually cast our vote, as per trustee rules.
Yeah, so what I do with Michael before the board meetings, I think, is more get the board perspective on it. So on every agenda item, there's often a story that follows behind it, and since I am a student and I'm not really fully in the loop, this is my opportunity to kind of hear the background information. So what sparked this this motion being brought forward? What sparked this request for information? And so then I have a more cohesive idea. So I do bring my perspective as a student and from my peers, but I also get this other perspective from the board. So I'm not going into it completely blind. I also do have opportunities in the interim to speak to other board members. It's not so formal, but there is a lot of open engagement and discussion between myself and the other trustee members. Does that answer your question?
I think maybe an example of that is just I'll usually say, so we have this recommendation here to say surplus this school site. Here are some of the considerations I have. Here are some of the questions I have. As an elected official, I received these emails from the community. Here's how I'm weighing my decision, and just to sort of give her the background there. Our colleagues have been in our little hallway, in our little corner. They've been very eager to share as well too, and actually, while Johannah doesn't get to formally cast a vote, she has spoke at our board meetings before and sort of given her thoughts or opinions from sort of a student perspective. So there was an opportunity where we were looking at some of the courses that were going to be offered to our high school students, where she offered accolades to our administration for the work that they had done in bringing forward those options, which I think was well received and an added perspective. So it's something that we try and make accessible a considerable amount of information, and sometimes it's been helpful for me where Johannah has said, well, what about this or what about that, and then I've had to say, you're right, that's not in the report. I should go see the superintendent and try and get that before board meetings, sort of thing. The scholarship.
Oh, the question was, is there an honorarium for my position, or is this paid or voluntary? So I do get a stipend of the $2,000 scholarship that I can use at the end of my term. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Johannah, doing a little bit of reading about Ontario, which of course we know is mandated by the provincial government,
So, from my personal perspective, I do think that it is important to give the student a vote. Like you mentioned, that is an important component, and it has been put into place by the province, where it is mandated that every school board must have a student trustee. So for Alberta, even that idea hasn't been approached yet. I do think that this is a start. It's a process. So every journey has to have a beginning, and I really do believe that that's where we are right now. In the future, if that happens, I would love to see that, even just to have that in the record. So the student, like the student body, the voice of the student body voted this way, and have that down in the record and in the papers. I think that is absolutely important. Perfect.
When we looked at the spectrum of options for the pilot project, we considered, okay, a full legal recorded vote on this end and just speaking rights on this end, and there may be some sort of a middle option where Johannah can vote, the student trustee could vote, but it's not recorded against the count, sort of thing. So it could be a 6-2 vote with the student trustee voting in the affirmative, or something like that. That would be a vote of it would be acknowledging the vote and the perspective and the opinion without actually counting it to this. So, and Johannah has been very good in her speaking turns. She said, I would support this initiative, or I believe students would support this initiative because. So even without the voting power, she's found ways to bring forward her position there. So somewhere, again, pilot project, work in progress, but I do believe that voting is as an important part of this and figuring out some way in the middle there. But that being said, I think we may have some potential work to do with the School Act and our legal counsel to make sure whatever we decided would be above board, so to speak.
Well, I do have to admit that the board meetings aren't that boring for me. I mean, there's always a multiple of different perspectives that you can see on any agenda item. So, I mean, call me the black sheep, but I haven't really found any board meeting boring.
Yeah. Great. I believe we...
Question?
Dorcas, did you... I thought I saw a hand at the front table.
Oh.
That's a good question, so the question was, how did we ensure on our student advisory council that we got a diverse representation of student leaders? And that I would have to defer to administration, but basically how they specifically did that. But I know when we said we want the student advisory council, one of our sort of goals was we want a diverse representation, and sort of left that to administration to figure out, and they would talk with their principals, and the principals would suggest the different students. So administration did that. I can ask them specifically, but they were successful in putting the selection together. The council was very diverse. Do you want to add to that? No, don't know. Yeah.
Yes, in the back. So I'll let Michael answer the question, but the question was, in the election process, it's a one-year term. Are you looking to make the term be extended because of the costs associated? Right. So what it would look like if we had an election every year?
That may be a consideration, but I don't think it would be received well by the board, because I think the board wanted sort of more opportunities for engagement and having a student each year. When we were discussing this idea, I remember one proposal was, well, okay, so we have 15 board meetings. What if we had one student leader as our student trustee come to each board meeting, a different one each time? We could engage 15 students. That was an opportunity that was put forward. I believe we considered, or we decided not to do that for the pilot project, because we wanted to have we thought the onboarding time in terms of getting that trustee educated, reading the board package, getting ready to respond, everything else would be too significant. But it is the duration of time is a consideration. Other questions? How are we doing for time? Oh, great. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes, in the back. So the question was, the leadership course, Legacy, that is district-wide, is that a credit course? Yes, it is a credit course. It is a 5-credit course. And so 3 to 5 credit course, that's still being determined. And so we had speakers come in, we had booklets filled out, but we also had projects that we worked on. So there were different committees that could work. So one of them was infill, one of them worked with the zoo. So there were various side projects for the marks. But more than that, I think what I really appreciated about this legacy course was that it focused on giving you skills. So not just memorizing information or listening to speakers, but it really focused on giving you skills and teaching you how to implement those skills.
Do you want to come up to the front?
Yeah, so Shelly Kofluk is a teacher from Ebbing Lizard. She's actually one of the teachers responsible for the legacy course.
So it was myself and another teacher in the district that we run the student leadership programs at our schools. We're also connected with the province-wide Alberta Association of Student Councils and Advisors. So with us developing this course, we had the prong of wanting to connect them with leaders in the community and hearing from the students. Like, we connected with the University of Alberta Students' Union. So we took a look at governance at the university level, and then students were able to compare that, what's happening in their schools, and then having that discussion. And this is where Johannah was trying to say, well, what structure could we put in place so that there leaves a legacy? So that was something that Johannah had really tried to kind of work on with the 25 or so students involved in the legacy course. We had 12 out of about, I mean, we have various alternative programs, but there were 12 high schools that sent out of about 17 high schools that would have representation. So there was anywhere from 1 to 3 students from the high schools, and it was an evening course. We had 9 sessions. So there were 9 sessions where we had, for instance, the U of A Students' Union president. We met there. We met with the Edmonton Valley Zoo board members. So they came and presented on, you know, projects that they had going. And then we also looked at governance structures of the Calgary Zoo. So we had those 2. We had also Chris Morris, who was an Edmonton Eskimo football player, and he talked about, you know, school governance, and he talked about community pieces and what he does with his football team to try and raise the level of play and competition with U of A's football team. So there was that. There was our Stephen Mandel. We invited him in. He spoke with students on governance and what his personal opinions were and how he's managed, you know, moving forward with a vision. So we talked about that. We brought in a speaker from California. He happened to be around Edmonton for working on other things, but Phil Boyd, he's out of California working with project planning and student leadership. But then all the students were placed on boards. So they worked with a small group between 3 and 5. So when we were talking about city infill, there was a group of students that worked with city councilors. And so there was a connection with the City Edmonton Youth Council, and that's one thing they gave Johannah as an invited member. Were you? You sit on their board. So they invited the Edmonton Public School Board student trustee to sit on the City of Edmonton Youth Council. So it was kind of trying to cross many different, like, building education and moving into the community, but also how can we raise the level of understanding and skills and knowledge about governance with students so that they could put things into play, and not just at the school board level, but also far-reaching into the community. So you can speak to me more. I'm here today if you have any questions about the legacy course. And legacy still, yeah.
Could you speak to, is it a CTS module? How is that
Okay.
established? Just
So, yep, no, under the CTS modules, there's the Human and Social Services strand. So we have now the students, every high school, and this is where me and my colleague we're sitting down this week to sit through it, because some students came in, they're in grade 12, they've already had 2 years of like intro to mentorship, becoming a mentee, becoming a mentor, extending the mentoring relationship. So that mentorship piece is there. There's the CTS strands of leadership fundamentals 1, 2, and 3. There's a community volunteering piece, which is a little bit outside of the human and social services strand, but that piece can also be brought in. There's also the projects. So because each of the students were working on a project, so for instance, the Speak Out Committee, so we did kind of partner too at the beginning with the Speak Out's JSET teams, so jurisdictional student engagement teams. They had brought that initiative out, and because we had 2 students sitting on the Ministers' Council, there was going to be funding for us to include them in this course. So Brendan, who is here today, Brendan, do you want to give a wave? So, you know, those students, we wanted to bring what was happening at the provincial level also to the students of the district. So they came in, and that Brendan worked and mentored some of the students, and that's where the Alberta Student Voice Initiative, so with their Twitter handle, they started to kind of engage other students around when the Speak Out forum was canceled. They said they wanted to bring a voice to that. So they started the initiative with just more of a way to engage students in sharing their concerns and highlighting what's happening with education at the provincial level and trying to use that. So that was kind of a bit of them. The big thing too is having the students be able to network. So not only with Johannah, sharing what's happening at the board. So we would say, you know, we'd have her present at each of our 9 meetings. We started only second semester. We started around the exam turnaround for high schools, and we went with 9 sessions till April, and then they continued just on their individual board work. So Johannah would present what's happening. Our Speak Out students would also present what's happening. We'd have a guest speaker at those meetings to kind of give them different perspectives. We'd also have them work on board work, so they were all set on with board works of, you know, 3 to 6 students. So yeah. There were a question? Yeah. Okay, yeah, we'll let them finish up, and then we could maybe have that yeah, okay.
Yeah, so what's going to happen now, thank you for that question, is that with the students that are sitting at your board table, you'll be able to have some conversations with them. So they have been given a sheet of paper with some questions to facilitate this conversation. And then after this conversation, we will have another question period / time.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, a good question, and one we'll be mulling over with the board in June when we get the report with a more fleshed out perspective. I think for me, just speaking as one trustee, speaking personally, I think it's been an absolute pleasure to have a student trustee at the board to I think it sends an important signal to our staff and our community that the student voice is important, that we want to hear from them. It was, I can think of one opportunity where our board passed a motion with regard to consent and how important consent was to be teaching in the sexual education curriculum, and to have the student perspective there and speaking very articulately and compassionately to the media, I thought was most important. And it was that moment where it was like, yes, this is another opportunity to engage together. I think I really enjoyed watching the election experience and seeing the different students engage. I enjoy how we're talking about how public education is a community partnership, and it's a project where we should be hearing more from students and engaging them. And I think that's sort of the direction that through Inspiring Education and the Education Act, and I think the expectations of our community are going. To what extent the students should be involved in formal governance, I think we're still trying to work that out. To what extent do we have this as the sort of marquee opportunity for student engagement? I'm not sure, because I don't want it to ever devolve into oh well, we have a student trustee, we're done, we've engaged students. Like I want it to be something that's more reflective of, this is the apple on the tree that has an enormous and healthy root structure throughout our districts. So if I sound a little muddled, it's because I've truly been thinking through all the pros and cons as well too. I think I'm very glad we did the pilot project. What the future looks like, I'm not sure yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, if I can speak to that, British Columbia has 2 student trustees, so one in a more city, urban environment, and then also one in a smaller rural board, and they found that both have been quite successful. So if you look at those models in British Columbia, that's something that we can see evidence of. And in terms of the actual practicality, since Michael knows more.
Yeah, I mean, who am I to talk to you about transportation challenges? But it is yeah, the buses. Yeah, I mean, it's always difficult, I think, to just make sure that our student is getting to and from school safely. For opportunities like this, there was a little bit of extra logistics. Like, we're very fortunate that her teacher was able to come with her, because it's technically a field trip, and then we had to sign off and get legal counsel and insurance, blah 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 blah. You know, there's these different pieces about how to make the program work that we're still learning our way through. And there's some permission pieces there, but I absolutely think it, as somebody who grew up and went through grade 12 in Strathmore, Alberta, and Golden Hills, I think there would be an opportunity to do something like this. It may be more of the council model may be different. How you sort of farm team the students up may be different, but I trust that that's something that all of you as boards will work out in your own unique way for your district.
Mm-hmm.
You get Michael's perspective because he signed on to be your mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be more helpful to you, sorry, and I didn't say who I was either, Janine Tucker, Foothills as well with Lori. Would it be more beneficial to you if, as a board, they'd signed on and everybody, let's say, took a month to mentor you, so that you got the full perspective and a mentorship experience across the board?
Yes, yes. But I mean, I do have to give incredible kudos to the board for being so open and so receptive and friendly. Like, they were just as blind going into this as I was. And so to be able to speak candidly with them and have them, you know, treat me as an individual, not just as a student, like, oh wow, you're like half my age. No, was incredible to see. So I just want to state, this is the first year, and something that I struggled with was being able to connect with the 90,000 students that I represent. But it is a first year, and that in itself, I think, is an amazing accomplishment. And so with that, I'd really like to encourage this time for more conversations at your table. Thank you.
So now what we would like to do is do a bit of the caring and sharing piece. What were some of the examples at your table that came up, or any further questions that surfaced, or anything you may want to share with the group? What were... Well, what were some of the highlights that came up at your table, or some of the questions that you're pondering now, or some of the takeaways from this presentation that you might wish to have further discussion about.
So now that you've been able to talk with the student and kind of have this conversation and maybe explore some new topics, are there any more questions that you'd like to ask towards either myself or Michael, or maybe to a student from another table? Yes. Yeah. In the front here? Yeah, that is something that I have encountered, not as strongly, I don't think, but I definitely agree with that. In order to move forward, I guess move up levels, you need to be able to have that open communication. And so what I've encountered in many of my schools, and I'll also invite Shelley to come up and speak to that.
strong.
And they are also, it's a legitimate course and teachers network. And that strength, I think, has been where students are coming to these, like the legacy group, and they're participating in.
Yes.
And so anyways, I think there's a lot expertise in the province, and it's giving that, it's not saying that a principal or a school says, okay, who's the newbie on the block that's going to take this one, because this is a lot of extra time that they have to give to this, right? You know, like there's, you don't give your 30 IP, you know, course to the newbie teacher. They want the experience, right? And that's what student leadership, it's a lot of times given to the newest person on the block who doesn't understand the skills that are necessary to really make it thrive. So
Yeah, so that is very important.
Dorcas, you had a quick question.
One of the places in our system that currently exists that's legislated is the student involvement on school councils at a high school level. And I know historically that has been a position that hasn't always been taken up because of the difficulties that exist in actually having that vibrant student council in the school. So, your new system, are you seeing increased involvement with the student on school councils?
That's actually a very good question, and one I've been mulling over as well too. As I think about I work with 6 high schools in my ward as a trustee, and I have not. I think I've had half of them have had a student present when I go to meet with the parent council, the school council. So that's something that I would hope that as we continue discussing what this looks like, that we can involve more students in existing governance structures at their own high schools, not just their high schools, but the junior highs and elementaries as well too. I think it's crucial if we really want to see engagement that we do think local.
And we had a question over here.
Yes, this one's for Joannah. John Spitzenberger, Glendale Head Public School Division. Seems you're now a trustee. One of the issues we deal with as a trustee, especially in all of our communities, is there's 6, 8, 10, 12 parents that have our ear, that contact us regularly with concern. And I'm going to say those 6, 10, 12 parents are the student representatives that you have from each of your schools. How have you been, or have you been able to connect with the other students with the schools? Have they sought you out? Have you sought their opinions out? How's that been?
So that's something that's probably one of my biggest challenges that I faced this year, is how do I? I mean, what I had was the legacy course and the student advisory council and myself. And so going from there, what I tried to do to work around that was texting, meeting kids that I knew, trying to see, okay, so here's an issue that's being brought up in the board. How can I get the information to them and receive their feedback? But that's definitely something that I think that is absolutely imperative if we want any kind of student engagement to go on in the future, is to have a network in place where students are able to communicate across schools. So I think I touched upon that, but what I found is that the schools are often quite isolated in terms of educational topics, where the students don't really interact with other students as students to talk about that. So that's something that I've been really working towards.
Supplemental to that, I think it's an issue that all of us struggle with about it's representative democracy, not direct democracy. We're not trying to make sure that the 90,000 students vote on every single issue, but we are trying to make sure that through other mechanisms, like we're totally redoing our district survey to have students have an opportunity to give feedback as well too. We're redoing some of the consultative mechanisms that we use to solicit feedback from schools, parents, communities, and partners, and we're trying to be mindful of that too. How, okay, we heard from this group, but what are we hearing from sort of the broad swath of others? So it's a work in progress. Mr. Waters, and then I think we have to wrap up.
This, what do you think about? So I think that's something that the board could do, and I think the board would want to get that out as early as possible. So give the students the opportunities they need, so if there are issues, they can let you know, rather than you keep chasing and finding out what do you think about this, because it's a lot of work on you.
Yes, but I mean, that is absolutely valid. What we're talking about, though, is my hope is that this becomes a culture. And just like any culture, it takes time to grow. So right now, if I have to chase after these students, if I have to be the one reaching out my arm, then yeah, so be it. That's how it starts. But I do have some students that have come up to me and said, oh, this is something that I think, or this is just my perspective. And like that is so encouraging to me, because it's a start for a culture of students where it's not even a question of, oh, what does the board do? What is a trustee? Oh, there are high schools other than mine, and they have issues too. It's not that. That doesn't even become a question. And I think that'll be it. Thank you so much for your time.
And I would just like to, again, very much thank Johannah for coming down on a Saturday. As you know, it's June. She's a very busy grade 12 student, and she has a lot of academic pressures right now. So the fact that she was able to come down to be with us is I think we're greatly honored. And also to Shelley, as one of our teachers who's coming down here on a Saturday, all the marking and pressure and everything else that you're under at this time of year, we're very honored that you've taken the time to come and help us out on this field trip. So thank you.